Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters, and Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.
Hi, I'm Lori Baker. We're here today with Quilters Newsletter TV, the Quilters community. We have Mary Kate Karr-Petras. And Mary Kate, today you're going to talk to us about freezer paper.
We are going to talk about freezer paper. You and I were at a quilt show a few months ago, and we were demonstrating a lesson from our easy lesson from our October-November 2014 issue, which we called it a mixed media art quilt. It was a very cute little project that involved freezer paper.
Yes.
And when we were showing it to people, we would just jump in and say, well, you cut this from freezer paper, and you would hear it down. And there were a number of times where people would stop us, or they'd kind of get a glazed look. I mean, and I don't hold it against them, but they
had no idea.
They didn't know what freezer paper was.
Exactly.
Or what it was used for. So we thought, let's just kind of talk about the basics here. So this is freezer paper. I bought this at my well-stocked local grocery store. It was the only one. It's not like, you know, with aluminum foil, you have a variety of widths and so. No, this was the only choice available. What I find amusing is that it says right here on the packaging, used for arts and crafts.
Yes.
And the story that I've heard, and I haven't been able to find like a documentation online, but I've heard that there was a time, maybe in the 90s, where they were going to stop making freezer paper for consumers because people weren't wrapping their own fish anymore. You know what I mean? Or buying stuff from the butcher and then wrapping it themselves. And there was this big hue and cry from quilters saying, we can't take our freezer paper, we need it. And so that's what I've heard, at least. So it has not been discontinued. You might have to hunt for it on the shelf, but it should be there for a well-stocked grocery store. But also, you can also buy it for craft. The craft industry has risen to the challenge too.
And you can also buy it in sheets that you can feed through your printer, which is a really cool idea, I think.
Like 8.5 by 11-inch sheets, or a variety of things. So if your grocery store doesn't work out for you, you definitely can find it online.
Yes.
So, so as you can see, it has two sides. It has the matte paper side, and then it has this shiny plastic coated side. It's not wax. I used to think it was wax paper, but it's not wax. It's plastic. It's a very light coating of plastic. And that is what you use, and the two sides do matter. So, so here, let's just go over the technique that we were demonstrating. It involves cutting shape of a leaf. It could be any shape, really. But for this project, it was a leaf. So these are, I traced onto paper that's been used many times, as you can see already, a couple of leaves from my aspen tree. And then I took freezer paper and laid it on top, shiny side down, matte side up. Just lay it on top, and you can see, if you might want to use a light table or a window, but even so, if your lighting is pretty good and your eyesight's pretty good, you can see through that. It's transparent enough. And just trace your shape, you know, with a pencil or a pen, whatever works, and then cut it out with paper scissors. And you can cut as much detail into that for this application as you want. And you really, as you can see, I cut a lot of these little serrated edges into it.
Curves.
None of that is wasted time. It's all gonna, we're gonna see all of that. So then, take just a piece of fabric. I forget what the original lesson called for, but whatever you're going to be painting on, we're going to be using a paint stick. I should mention, when you have a shape like this, it's called a mask. A stencil is where you would get the positive image. So you would, it's cut so that you have the outline and the inside is empty, if you will. This is a mask, so it's essentially the inside part of a stencil. So we're going to be painting around this shape, so it's going to give us a negative image. But again, it's really neat. So then I just come over here and make sure that my iron hasn't turned off. And then I just literally, with, again, shiny side down, you want shiny side down.
And just
that's
like
basically all it took.
Yeah.
And it's just enough to make that shape, that freezer paper shape, stick to your fabric. And that's really all you want. You could use a grip mat for this next step, or painter's tape.
Right.
But we're just going to quickly show the rest of this technique that we were doing using a paint stick. It's oil-based paint. These things don't dry out. They might develop a bit of a crust after not being used for a few weeks or months, but then you just kind of crack that off, and then underneath they're beautiful, soft, and you just paint onto the freezer paper template.
You're not touching the cloth at all. It's
Nope.
all on the template.
It's all on the paper. I don't want to get too close to the edges. And then I'm using a stencil brush, and you can, however you want to brush it off onto the fabric, this is just fun. It's easy, it's no pressure. You can brush it off like this with using a kind of a brush stroke, or you can use more of a standard stenciling, you know, swirling the brush like this. And let's just get it all off so that we can see the shape when we pull it up. It's very quick. I found this very satisfying.
Yes.
I'm not a painter, but so there was something really fun about the painterliness, I don't know, of using a brush. It was just a new technique for me, while still feeling like, oh, this is a quilting project, and I'm not getting out of my, you know, self-imposed boundaries or what have you, if those things matter to you. Hopefully they don't.
Yeah.
But it's a good entree maybe into another craft, because we all need more stash, right?
That's right.
We all need to go out and have
Absolutely.
more craft supplies in our
Yes.
homes. So then you can really easily just kind of get your fingernail into there, and it comes right up. And look at that. Like I said, none of the time I took to cut that detail into the edges was wasted. You see all of that right there.
Yes.
And then if you want to see our October-November 2014 issue, you can see how the project was completed with hand stitching. You could do machine stitching, whatever, but it's just really nice, fun little project.
Yes.
So that's one use of freezer paper. The other thing that's nice about the freezer paper is you can use it multiple times. I'm not going to throw this away.
Right.
I can use it again. And in fact, I still have some of my templates left over from that demo that we did. These are painted because they've been used before, but I'm not going to, I didn't mean to throw that on the floor. I'm not going to throw them away yet because they still have some life left in them on the back, and you never know when I never know when I might want to use them again, because like I said, it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. So that was the first technique, and that was the one that really inspired us to want to do this episode.
Correct.
But there are other applications, and actually going back a little bit more toward the beginning of our education as quilters.
Right.
Applique.
Applique. To be specific, turned edge applique.
Exactly. Exactly. You can do, which as opposed to needle turn. Needle turn is where you're using the needle to bend those edges under. This is a turned edge technique. When you get a pattern, your shapes, your applique shapes might come on a pull-out pattern sheet like this, which is, this is one of ours. We're just going to show a simple circle today. We just wanted to talk briefly about how you would prepare your applique, your templates if you had a more complicated shape like this. You would trace each shape individually, and you would just sort of guess or infer where the line that goes underneath an overlaying shape goes. You would trace each one separately and cut them out separately. But for now, we're just going to show a circle. So I've already gone ahead, and it's the same thing. I'll just show again. You just lay your freezer paper, same idea, shiny side down.
Yes.
Trace your shape, cut it out. Except here, we are not going to adhere it to the right side of our fabric. Now, the technique that I showed before with the painting, I showed it on a solid fabric, so there was really no right or wrong side. That is something you do on the right side of the fabric. If it's a print, you know, if a blender or what have you. With applique, you're going to stick it to the wrong side of the fabric. So we're going to turn that over. Again, take it.
And it only takes a few seconds.
That sound tells me it's done.
Yes.
And then we rough cut around it. these lock. They're so fancy. For turned edge applique, the rule of thumb is about 3/16 of an inch. Most of us aren't going to be that precise, but that's just sort of eyeballing it. It's letting you know it's a real scant quarter inch. So you just rough cut around it. So if you're cutting multiple shapes, whoops, that's a little tight. If you're cutting multiple shapes out of the same fabric, you might want to lay them all down and make sure that you've got enough, at least a 1/2 inch between each one, so you have enough seam allowance. Because there's no seam allowance built into these applique patterns. You add your seam allowance. Okay.
There you go.
There we go. I guess I should lock these again. Nope, didn't happen. Okay. And then we are going to starch down the edges. So here we have some spray starch. I'm just going to spray it into this cup just to get a little bit in there. That's enough. Then I'm going to use this Q-tip, dip it in, and go around and paint. Here I'm talking about how I never get the opportunity to paint. I guess I should be doing more turned edge applique. And we're just going to go around and paint all of the edges. Okay, so I've basically got my edges painted down, if you will.
And fairly wet, actually.
Fairly wet, right. I'm going to take it back over to our pressing surface, and if you want to use a stiletto of some sort, there are a variety of tools that you can use to kind of hold this. But I'm going to live dangerously. And then we just press the edges around, easing in the fullness. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go all the way around. And you would want to, take your time with it.
Right.
And ease in that fullness, take some time with it. But I just wanted to show how, and again, this is not in the interest of time.
Yes.
But you would want to make a nice smooth edge. But then you can just peel out carefully, gently, gently. Peel out your freezer paper, and it holds. You could give it another good press if you wanted, although this is on steam right now, so I don't want to undo the good work I just did.
Right.
And then again, you can probably get at least one more usage out of this before you've got to toss it.
Right.
And then you don't have to leave any basting stitches in. You don't need to then go back and cut a slit in your backing fabric to pull out the paper template or rip out any basting stitches, which is the real old school traditional way of doing turned edge hand applique. And you can finish this by hand or by machine. How much do you love that?
Yes, I like the machine part.
I know you do. And that is just a real classic quilter's way of using freezer paper.
Okay.
So we just wanted to talk about that so that people know that this is another tool that's out there. It can make your life easier, and it can really increase your creativity. I mean, I had never thought about doing paint stick painting before this project came to us.
Exactly.
And now I have so many ideas of how I want to use it. So.
Yes. And freezer paper is our friend.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. So just next time you're in the grocery store, pick up a roll, and that way you've got it next time a project comes up that calls for it.
Exactly. Thank you, Mary Kate.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. Do come back and see us again next time. And until then, happy quilting.
Quilters Newsletter TV, the quilters community, is brought to you by Handy Quilter, designed by a quilter for quilters, and Husqvarna Viking, keeping the world sewing for over 140 years.